Tetsuya Nomura is hands down one of the most captivating and interesting figures in the video game industry. His original ideas and iconic style have played a large part in some of Square Enix's most successful titles. Whether you love his crazy story designs and concepts, or you think he's actively ruining video games as we know it, he's a big name in the industry. And he's a hard worker. Even today, Nomura bounces between projects frequently, and based on my research for this video series, has had projects in circulation since 1991. Hi, my name's Joe. When I like something a whole lot, I want to find out what's going on behind the curtain. This video is that. I did the research and write-up for my benefit, but I did this video part for yours, so I can pass on this information as completely and definitively as possible without boring my friends and family. In this video series, I will examine all of Tetsuya Nomura's works to the best of my ability. I understand there are countless videos available regarding the very start of his career, so some information may be quite familiar to you if you frequently watch videos on this topic. But I've done my best to make what you watch here today a smidgen more informative and entertaining than videos before. And before long, we'll be in uncharted territory. I'll include all of my sources in the description below, and I'll include a number on screen if I am citing a source. I'll also include fun facts and text boxes on screen to give you some bonus information if you're actively watching the video. I've grouped each project as accurate to development as possible, but Nomura would sometimes be bouncing between 4 to 5 projects at a time. So I've arranged all titles in order of release, with out-of-place blurbs about relevant titles if necessary. Now that everything's out of the way, let's dive into the prolific career of Tetsuya Nomura. The oldest drawing I still have is a drawing of a lion I did on my 3rd birthday. I often drew a lot after returning home from preschool. Since then, I've always loved drawing. Tetsuya Nomura grew up in Kochi Prefecture, Japan. To date, Kochi has a population of over 3 million, including the surrounding area and downtown citizens. It boasts some of Japan's most beautiful landscapes and waters, and prides itself on them. Located on the smallest of Japan's 4 main islands, Nomura grew up in this city from 1970 to 1988 before leaving for vocational school in Tokyo at age 18. Recalling his childhood, Nomura notes that he did everything he could at his age. Drawing, baseball, building forts, swimming, fishing, playing board games, inventing rules for them, and after a while, coding and creating his own games on his computer. His father was a large influence in the beginning of his path. Little Tetsuya would often receive drawings from his dad, special help with arts and crafts, and guidance into the upcoming era of computers. When his son was in lower secondary school, Mr. Nomura bought a computer for him, so he could begin exploring the medium. Little Tetsu would play video games frequently, and would sometimes have to borrow everything to play from his friends. He became quite fond of Dragon Quest in his video gaming endeavors, and remembers sinking a lot of time into Legends of Star Arthur, Planet Mephius. In upper secondary school, an adolescent Tetsuya Nomura could often be found doodling manga panels in class and showing his classmates during breaks. At one point, his art teacher introduced him to Yoshitaka Amano's artwork. Amano was a popular artist who, at the time, was also the lead artist and character designer for the Final Fantasy games. As graduation grew closer and manga artist felt insurmountable to pursue, Nomura decided to attend vocational school for advertising so he could ensure steady employment. In vocational school, Nomura encountered Amano's artwork again, this time in an employment magazine. Square, the game development company then hailed for Final Fantasy 1 through 3, was recruiting for entry-level positions. This prompted Nomura to reflect on where he wanted to be professionally. I just wanted a job where I could make something while being able to draw. At the same time, I knew that I wouldn't be able to do anything on my own. So that's when I thought of making games. I couldn't think of any other choices. Bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, Tetsuya Nomura showed up for his first day at Square in a suit to be certain that he looked as presentable as possible. He joined the company quite close to the development deadline for Final Fantasy IV, and so for his first day with the company, Nomura found himself doing entry-level work dressed in a suit. His role, debugging, ensured the quality of the game by seeking and correcting bugs in the game's code to make sure the battle system, event triggers, and other important things were bug-free for a smooth experience. He learned the basics of the position from battle graphics designer Tetsuya Takahashi. This project was both Tetsuya's first at Square. Other notable Final Fantasy IV staff include series director Hironobu Sakaguchi, series character designer Yoshitaka Amano, series composer Nobuo Uematsu, and lead game designer / scenario writer Takashi Tokita. Final Fantasy IV was released on the Super Famicom on July 19, 1991. The game was localized in North America as Final Fantasy II on the Super Nintendo on November 23, 1991. It was the first 16-bit entry in the series, the first to introduce the active time battle system, coined by battle designer Hiroyuki Ito, and one of the first to include a complex plot with a cast of fleshed-out, original characters. All of these qualities and more led it to be highly regarded in its time, and still today as one of the first examples of a modern Japanese role-playing game, or JRPG. Final Fantasy IV would serve as the foundation for each Final Fantasy to come, setting a new precedent for Square and the JRPG genre. After Final Fantasy IV's launch, Nomura was chosen to be in charge of monster design for Final Fantasy V. He'd also contribute to the project as part of the battle graphics team. However, Tetsuya Takahashi had moved from battle graphics to field graphics for this title, so the two weren't working in the same department. Like 4 had, 5 brought on some newcomers to the Final Fantasy series. Most notably, map designer Kaori Tanaka and field planner and scenario writer Yoshinori Kitase. This would be Kitase's third project working at Square, Tanaka's first, and both's first mainline Final Fantasy. Working as monster designer, Nomura was being paid quite a low salary. Back then, background designers were the ones being paid a big cut for their job, but Nomura did not want to chase the money. Instead, he was upset that monster design was taken so lightly in the industry. When he brought this up to Hironobu Sakaguchi, Sakaguchi replied, "Then it's up to you to spread the notion that monster design is important." This reply would stick with Nomura. At one point around this time, Nomura discovered Yoshitaka Amano's first design of Final Fantasy III's Cloud of Darkness in a strategy guide and was quite taken with it. He decided to himself then that he'd like to use that design someday. Nomura would work closely with Amano, as some monsters originated from Amano's pen and were given to Nomura to illustrate. Keeping Sakaguchi's words in mind, Nomura would create his own monsters as well. His original works for this game include Magic Pot, Tonberry, and Gilgamesh. Nomura created these monsters in response to the popularity of the iconic monsters in the Dragon Quest games. They have all since remained iconic staples in the Final Fantasy series. Gilgamesh's name originates from the Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the oldest surviving works of literature composed in ancient Mesopotamia. The series of poems follow Gilgamesh, the historical king of Uruk, whose tyrannical rule leads the gods to create Enkidu as his rival-turned-companion. The two kill a giant, and Enkidu is sentenced to death by the gods. After Enkidu's death, Gilgamesh embarks on a futile quest for immortality. Despite his namesake, the Gilgamesh from Final Fantasy V is mainly inspired by Benkei, a 12th century warrior monk who served the legendary Yoshitsune Minamoto. Said to have stood over 7 feet tall, Benkei had mastered 7 weapons in addition to his sword. According to legend, he set out to collect 1,000 swords from samurai he deemed unworthy at Gojo Ohashi Bridge in Kyoto. After claiming 999, he spotted Yoshitsune and challenged him. They dueled on the Gojo Ohashi Bridge, where the young Yoshitsune defeated him. Seeking revenge, Benkei waited at Kiyomizu Temple and challenged him again, only to lose once more. Humbled, Benkei pledged lifelong loyalty. The two later fought side by side in Japan's Genpei War, meeting their end at the Battle of Kodomo River. To avoid capture, Yoshitsune fled to a nearby shrine to commit seppuku, while Benkei held off their enemies on a bridge, reportedly cutting down 300 soldiers in close combat. Realizing they could not defeat Benkei directly, his opponents shot him with arrows. Benkei died upright, pierced and bleeding, and only fell after his enemies cautiously passed his dead body to cross the bridge. Benkei and Minamoto's historic companionship began on a bridge, and so too did it end on one. In the Final Fantasy series, the idea of the Four Fiends first appeared in Final Fantasy and later in Final Fantasy IV, where 4 separate boss monsters are servants of the primary villain. In Final Fantasy V, Gilgamesh fills this role alone. He confronts the party 6 different times over the course of the story, 4 of which fill the typical placement of the Four Fiends. His second encounter with the party takes place on a bridge, in homage to Benkei and a landmark in the Final Fantasy series. Here, he is a tall, buff, armored warrior that fights with a naginata or glaive. His armor, the Genji armor, can be stolen off of him in battle for the party to equip. The Genji armor derives its name from Yoshitsune Minamoto and Benkei's clan name from the Genpei War. The armor set had been recurring since Final Fantasy II, but its appearance on Gilgamesh forever recontextualized it within the lore of Final Fantasy. In the third encounter, Gilgamesh is accompanied by Enkidu, a creature whose name directly references the loyal companion from the Mesopotamian epic. In the fourth encounter, Gilgamesh sheds his armor to reveal he has 8 arms, each holding different weapons, a nod to Benkei's arsenal. Although he serves as the chief lieutenant to the game's main antagonist, Exdeath, Gilgamesh is characterized less by cruelty than by rivalry and begrudging admiration. He develops a genuine respect for the heroes even as he opposes them. After repeated failures to defeat the party, Exdeath casts him into the interdimensional rift, dismissing him as incompetent. There, Gilgamesh completes his arc. When the heroes face Necrophobe within the rift, he intervenes and sacrifices himself to ensure their survival. In the process of each Final Fantasy's development, each team member would be encouraged to record any ideas they had in their individual plan books. During development for 5, Hironobu Sakaguchi and Yoshinori Kitase would find themselves looking forward to seeing Nomura's ideas specifically. This was partly because he would sketch and write by hand in his planning book, drawing on his background in advertising, while the other team members typically used computers to type out their ideas. Nomura would not shy away with his ideas either, even boldly approaching Kitase to rework the ending of the game, which he found to be goofy. This tweak made it to the game's final release. Of his other ideas floating around during the time of Final Fantasy V, Nomura notes his concept for a ninja with a dog and a gambler that fights with dice and cards were among the fray. These 2 ideas would become members of Final Fantasy VI's main cast: Shadow, the wandering mercenary, his dog, Interceptor, and Setzer Gabbiani, the gambling vagabond who fights using cards, darts, and dice. These characters would be illustrated and handled by Amano, but they originated from Nomura's plan book. Nomura would even contribute to Shadow's backstory, suggesting the flashback cutscenes that tell it. With Sakaguchi's words in mind, Nomura made a point to push his monster design work further with Final Fantasy VI. One of his innovations in this title was his design for the Statue of the Gods, a 3-phase showdown occurring directly before the final battle with God Kefka. The sprite for the statue is a sketch Nomura scanned into his computer and traced through pixel art. His design work for the final 2 encounters of the game showcased the eldritch side of his monster design, typically including disassembled human anatomy, fused with symbols tied to the given situation. On the lighter side of things, Nomura contributed the iconic Cactuar to the Final Fantasy series when developing monsters for 6. Nomura also worked as a graphic director alongside Tetsuya Takahashi. Takahashi's main duty on the project was to ensure that the game would remain consistent with its Industrial Revolution aesthetic. He designed the Magitech armor as it is seen in the game's intro cinematic, after much creative back and forth with Hironobu Sakaguchi. Takahashi also likely ran into Kaori Tanaka at the time. For Final Fantasy VI, she was part of the field graphics team that would create the game's environments. She was on this team with newcomer Yusuke Naoda, whose work on the village of Zozo would wow those able to promote him. This time around, Yoshinori Kitase and Hiroyuki Ito split the role of director, marking the first mainline Final Fantasy not directed by Sakaguchi. He instead served as producer, and co-wrote the game's scenario with Kitase. This title was the first Final Fantasy to stray from a typical medieval setting, and the first to have no one protagonist hold more importance over the other. It also made the summon mechanic central to the plot, reinventing them as espers. Finally, combat featured the desperation attack system. If a character's health gets critically low, there is a 1 in 16 chance they may perform an extra powerful attack in place of a normal one. Final Fantasy VI was released on the Super Famicom on April 2, 1994. The game was localized as Final Fantasy III in North America and would release on the Super Nintendo on October 11th that same year. Final Fantasy VI has a reputation as a masterpiece and is considered by a good amount of fans to be the best game in the series. Evidently, Sakaguchi was very fond of robots at the time. Some of that fascination made its way into Final Fantasy VI's steampunk setting. That fascination also found its way into another project, Front Mission. This game was a tactical, turn-based strategy RPG, where players command customizable mechs called Wanzers across grid-based battlefields. Front Mission would introduce even more key players in Nomura's future. Developed concurrently with Final Fantasy VI, Front Mission was Square's first venture in coordinating projects with other development studios. Recently, Square had purchased Cobra Team, a small development team that had been creating licensed games published by Bandai. Around 1994, Cobra Team was purchased by Square and had its workforce merged into the company. Meanwhile, Toshiro Tsuchida of G-Craft, a different independent developer, approached Square, pitching his concept for what would become Front Mission. As talks furthered, staff from Solid, the new name for the now Square-merged Cobra Team, were appointed to the project in order to maintain communications between Square and G-Craft. This resulted in Solid's Shinji Hashimoto working as a producer on Front Mission. Tetsuya Nomura worked as part of the graphic design team for this game, once again with Tetsuya Takahashi and Yusuke Naoda. Sketches from Front Mission might have perhaps been the earliest display of his full artistic ability, but Nomura's career position during this time was not quite there yet. Yoshitaka Amano served as the lead artist, providing the game's key visuals and illustrations. And established composer Yoko Shimomura handled the soundtrack. Having recently gained widespread recognition for her work on Street Fighter II, Shimomura was just beginning most of her recognizable early work. Front Mission marked the first collaboration between Nomura, Hashimoto, and Shimomura on the same game. Nomura would also spend some time helping Live Alive's translation for the Tosa dialect of Japanese, Kochi Prefecture's native dialect. Live Alive was directed by Takashi Tokita. Again, Nomura would be credited on the same game as Yoko Shimomura. When the time came to start development for Final Fantasy VII, employees were asked to turn in ideas for the story. Hironobu Sakaguchi's first concept would take place in New York City and follow a detective named Joe. This game was going to be the first 3D Final Fantasy. Developers were learning their new Silicon Graphics workstations and would develop a tech demo featuring characters from Final Fantasy VI in 3D using these. After some early decisions were made for the title, a majority of the Final Fantasy VII team would pause and help Chrono Trigger finish development before its deadline. Another collaboration, and one of the most timeless JRPGs of all time, was truly the first Square Enix work. Before 2003, Squaresoft and Enix were two separate companies, with their flagship titles being Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest, respectively. 1995's Chrono Trigger brought together key creative forces from both franchises, including Final Fantasy director Hironobu Sakaguchi and Dragon Quest director Yuji Horii. These two would act as supervisors to directors Yoshinori Kitase, Takashi Tokita, and Akihiko Matsui. The project also included the talents of Dragon Quest character designer Akira Toriyama, best known as the creator of Dragon Ball, and longtime Final Fantasy composer Nobuo Uematsu. Uematsu had some help on this title. working with Noriko Matsueda and Yasunori Mitsuda. The former had begun work at Squaresoft with Front Mission. The latter had just started composition work at the company. The rest of the development team for Chrono Trigger was a good mix of newcomers and the Final Fantasy VI team. Tetsuya Nomura was assigned field graphics and worked in a team with Yusuke Naoda. Nomura and Naoda's team spent most of their time creating the environments, props, and backdrops for the game. Naoda would use Chrono Trigger to develop his skills as a background artist, making use of layering techniques and tinkering with the memory available on the Super Famicom to produce high-quality environments that were also cost-effective. Tetsuya Takahashi once again acted as graphics director. It was also around this time that he and Kaori Tanaka would begin brainstorming together, writing a script they would pitch for Final Fantasy VII. Chrono Trigger was released on March 11, 1995 in Japan, and August 22, 1995 in North America. The game was, and still is, entirely unique, boasting Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest as parents, and innovating on both series in its own way. Final Fantasy brought the ATB battle system and a cinematic plot and soundtrack. Dragon Quest contributed its charm, world building, and art direction. The perfect crossover. As we've seen, Tetsuya Nomura is no stranger to pitching bold ideas, no matter how unconventional. Despite his position at Square, he was constantly pushing boundaries, proposing changes to the ending of Final Fantasy V, contributing to the elaborate presentation of the Statue of the Gods in Final Fantasy VI, and even designing characters like Cactuar and Tonberry to rival the series staple monsters in the Dragon Quest games. It's no surprise, then, that he also conceived Square's 1996 Satellaview title, Dynami Tracer. The game, built off of Chrono Trigger's game engine, featured 6 playable characters in a race to collect treasure around 9 different planets. Though credited only as concept designer, Nomura also produced promotional artwork for the first time in his career. He created 2 pieces depicting the full playable cast. The style of these works suggests they were produced during the early development of Final Fantasy VII, as they reflect the same proportions and visual approach seen in his early sketches for that project. With producer Takashi Tokita, director Hiroki Chiba, and other developers such as Ju Nakayama and Takayuki Odachi on board, Dynami Tracer is an easily missable entry in Nomura's portfolio that introduces even more faces that will become relevant in his future. Dynami Tracer was never physically produced, and was instead broadcast using the Super Famicom's Satellaview expansion. The Satellaview was exclusive to Japan, which distributed games digitally via satellite in limited time windows, similar to satellite television. Dynami Tracer was broadcast 2 hours a day from January 27, 1996 to March 8, 1996, and then never again. Thankfully, the game is not lost and can be played today through emulation. Super Mario RPG lists Tetsuya Nomura in the credits under Special Thanks. It is likely that he designed the game's secret boss, Culex. A sketch of this character surfaced on Kazuyuki Kitoshima's Instagram in 2019. Kitoshima was the monster designer and a character supervisor on Mario RPG. Under the post, there was a comment asking if Nomura was responsible for Culex. Kitoshima did not respond to this comment. Even if he did design Culex, Nomura's monster design principles are evident in Culex's design. I believe that this is Nomura's work, however, considering the sketch, handwriting, and their similarity to his other sketches at the time. Culex is a great example of Nomura's eldritch designing, this time being more in line with his later creations. Whereas God Kefka still had his legs, Culex is but a floating torso, arms, and head, with crystals around his waist. The symbolism in the final encounters of Final Fantasy VI were largely based on the idea of godhood. Culex's concept is clearly based on the Final Fantasy series as a whole, considering the game's development by Square. His battle music is the boss battle music used in Final Fantasy IV. Thus, the crystals around his waist are quite fitting. Developed by Squaresoft and published by Nintendo, Super Mario RPG would be the Super Nintendo and Super Famicom's last Mario title. The game was released for Super Famicom in March 1996 and Super Nintendo in May 1996. Super Mario RPG would be the third project released with Nomura and Shimomura's name in the credits. In June 1996, Mario returned for one of the most important games of all time. Super Mario 64 made waves, releasing as a launch title for Nintendo's brand new 3D console, the Nintendo 64.
Most stores started selling the system today, and they've already sold out. Toys R Us had the largest shipment available to the public, and before noon, they were sold out.
This is going to be the system for the year, and it's obviously going to be one of those high-demand things. It's going to be extremely difficult to get a hold of.
Nomura was quite inspired by this title, and during the early days of development for the next Final Fantasy, expressed to his colleagues how inspiring the fully 3D environments were to him, and how he'd like to try his hand at such a game. One of his colleagues wasn't so sure, replying that such a concept couldn't rival Mario 64 unless it had an icon of its own, relating Mario's popularity to the popularity of Disney characters.
Must be locked.
Locked? Where's the key? Maybe it's like Goofy's teaching.
Let's see here. We got a car key, piano key, skeleton key, keyboard, key to the city, keyhole, key lime pie, key to my heart. Gorsh.
Nomura did not forget this remark. During development for Chrono Trigger, Tetsuya Takahashi submitted the story he and Kaori Tanaka had been working on. They thought it could easily become Final Fantasy VII. In it were influences from the works of philosophers Friedrich Nietzsche, Carl Jung, and Sigmund Freud. The protagonist would be a soldier with a split mind. It would be a game that explored deep questions concerning the existence of humanity and its purpose. However, this script was rejected by Hironobu Sakaguchi, who considered it too dark and cerebral for a Final Fantasy. Takahashi took this rejection and left the Final Fantasy VII team to establish his own within the company. This team would be in charge of developing Chrono Trigger 2, but Takahashi had other plans. The team would begin a different project, using Takahashi and Tanaka's Final Fantasy VII pitch under the working title Project Noah. Tetsuya Nomura was assigned to both Final Fantasy VII and Project Noah. While he was meeting with both Yoshinori Kitase and Tetsuya Takahashi to discuss how he should approach this, Hironobu Sakaguchi stepped in and told them, "Tetsu will work on Final Fantasy." So, Nomura stepped down from his position on Takahashi's project to pursue the next mainline Final Fantasy game. By the time Final Fantasy VII resumed production, Tetsuya Nomura had been working at Squaresoft for around 4 or 5 years. Yoshitaka Amano, character designer and artist for all 6 Final Fantasy games thus far, would be stepping down from his role. Firstly, he felt his art would pose a struggle for the series' jump to 3D. Secondly, he would be quite busy for the upcoming project, as he was still a popular artist aside from the games he worked on. Around this time, he had his first solo exhibition in New York City, and took this opportunity to move there and set up a studio. Regardless, Amano would still provide art for the series' logos and make paintings of each game's characters based on concepts. But largely, Nomura was handed the keys of this role. He recalls meeting with Amano only once during this development window. Now, he was the main character designer for the next Final Fantasy. Like Amano before him, Nomura would also create some monsters for the game. Not only this, but some of his story concepts were adopted by writer and director Yoshinori Kitase and writer Kazushige Nojima. Nojima had previously directed Bahamut Lagoon, and Final Fantasy VII was his second project with Square. Before that, Nojima was a scenario writer for Data East for about 6 years. Kitase was aware of his prior work and requested he emulate other works of his for specific parts of Final Fantasy VII. Other newcomers to the Final Fantasy series included Takeshi Endo, Tatsuya Kondo, and Masaru Oka. Like before with Final Fantasy VI, Hironobu Sakaguchi remained on board as producer for Final Fantasy VII. He'd create the game's materia system, which allowed players to equip abilities and spells to weapons and armor, altering the concept of character jobs in a new way for the Final Fantasy series. The system was dubbed Materia by Sakaguchi after a brief period of the working title Spheres, suggested by Nomura. The renaming was due to the difficulty of pronouncing the word sphere for Japanese players. Sakaguchi was also on board to ensure Final Fantasy VII felt cinematic. He and Kitase aimed for the game to be seamless. They'd aimed to make cutscenes not stick out against the gameplay to accomplish this. Art director Yusuke Naoda was hard at work on this as well, running the team of background artists that would fuel the game's environments. He employed the skills he had learned through work on Chrono Trigger and made sure his team detailed as much as possible in every given background of the game. Some of these details were Easter eggs, including a picture of Hironobu Sakaguchi and the Mona Lisa, to name a few. Tetsuya Nomura would be heavily involved in the story, working closely with Kitase and Nojima to ensure that each character's design was intentional and communicated their personality and story. He also directed battle visuals for the game, and created the Limit Break system, a riff on Final Fantasy VI's Desperation attacks. Each character has a gauge labeled Limit next to their other stats in battle. Taking and dealing damage increases the gauge. Once the limit gauge is full, each character has a unique special attack to unleash. Through repeated use of the mechanic, each character can learn even more of these moves. While Nomura did a lot of work designing characters and making up some of the concepts for the story, it should be noted that the greatness of Final Fantasy VII was not solely his doing. In the process of making the game, there was no one true director. Instead, most developers had their own ideas and projects that they worked into the game, turning to each other for help or rewrites when necessary. This meant that developers like event planners Jun Akiyama, Motomo Toriyama, and Hiroki Chiba could make big contributions to the game regardless of position. Instead of following previous entries and releasing the game on the current Nintendo console, the Nintendo 64, Squaresoft chose to move Final Fantasy VII to Sony's PlayStation. The decision was largely driven by hardware limitations. The PlayStation used CD-ROM discs, which provided far more storage space than the Nintendo 64's cartridges. This allowed the developers greater freedom with the game's scope. Sakaguchi was the catalyst for the deformed chibi character models used in gameplay. Regarding this, Yoshinori Kitase commented, "I think Mr. Sakaguchi wanted to follow the tradition of the pixel graphics and to show the characters' expressions on the field screens. So, he paid attention to the size of the heads. In battles, you can zoom in the camera, but since the field screens are a single background image, you can't do that. As a result, the proportion of the characters are different in battle and on the field." Due to these imposed graphical limits, Nomura had to adapt his art style and sketches to easily translate between the Ni Tushin art style used in most FMV cutscenes and battle, and the super deformed chibi avatars used in some cutscenes and on the field. He also faced another significant, though self-inflicted, challenge. Before we started Final Fantasy VII, the characters from Final Fantasy IV were still very popular, despite the fact that 5 and 6 had been released. I found this really frustrating. Why would people still be talking about those characters? So, I made it my goal to create my own batch of characters that would be remembered and loved by the Final Fantasy fans. Other than Barrett and Kate Sith, Nomura designed the cast with the writing team as the story took shape. He made an effort to give each character their own focal point, and was in charge of naming all characters, though a few were named by other staffers. Before we begin, let's run down some Final Fantasy VII vocabulary. For those unfamiliar, Final Fantasy VII reflects Taoism through the lifestream. The planet is a living entity, and the lifestream is its lifeblood, formed from the souls of all living things. Mako is lifestream energy that occurs naturally within the planet, but is refined by the Shinra Electric Power Company for electric power and experimentation, paralleling fossil fuel use while reinforcing the game's sci-fi tone. Materia are condensed Mako, enabling magic and replacing the Final Fantasy series' use of crystals. These are important concepts to remember, as the world, characters, and story of Final Fantasy VII are extremely fleshed out and tight-knit. Several story concepts were pitched in order to make this game groundbreaking in all different ways. It started as a noir set in New York City. Another later concept involved fighting a powerful sorceress. Yoshinori Kitase had written up a script that would follow a father and son throughout different time periods and flashbacks. And Tetsuya Takahashi's Project Noah was a Final Fantasy VII script being repurposed. Despite all of these new ideas, Kitase would prod Kazushige Nojima to write a story similar to his work on Glory of Heracles 3: Silence of the Gods, a game that featured an amnesiac protagonist. This served as the basis for protagonist Cloud Strife's backstory. Cloud's design went through several drafts and edits throughout production. At first, his hair was swept back in order to conserve polygons and resemble a historical samurai that we'll talk about later. His hair would be black to contrast with Sephiroth's silver. After looking at the first design, Nomura decided that this hairstyle didn't make Cloud stand out as a protagonist, and so his hair was made blonde and began to spike up more and more each draft. His first name is not based on the mass of condensed water vapor, but on how clouded his mind is. His last name, Strife, is defined as angry or bitter disagreement over fundamental issues. Cloud's final look makes use of asymmetry in order to differentiate his uniform from other Shinra soldiers and as a foil to Sephiroth's symmetry. His rigid armoring, hulking sword, and spiky hair all do well to set Cloud apart. I'd wager that Nomura gave Cloud at least 2, possibly 3 focal points. His hair, as it is the intended focal point, the Buster Sword, for obvious reasons, and thirdly, the ensemble on his left arm, including his pauldron and gauntlet. These items on his left side help balance his design against his spiky hair that is aimed right. Another thing to note here, and I'd like to thank Alleyway Jack for bringing my attention to this, is that Cloud's headshot maps very nicely onto the Fibonacci spiral. The Fibonacci spiral is built from adjoining squares based on the Fibonacci sequence, creating a curve that guides the viewer's eye along a deliberate path. In Cloud's case, the curve perfectly maps onto his headshot portrait. It follows the structure of his spiked blonde hair, directing attention inward and framing his face. His eyes then function as a secondary focal point in this close-up view, holding attention once the viewer's eye is drawn in. Cloud's eyes are blue with a green tint as a result of the Mako energy he was infused with. This is a trademark of every Shinra soldier and has a deeper symbolism that we'll discuss later. Though his counterpart, Zack, would later gain a surname, at the time of the game's original release, he did not have an official last name. Traditionally, the name Zack is a Hebrew name, meaning God has remembered. It was Nojima who had created Zack, but Nomura was in charge of his design. Because of this, elements drafted out of Cloud's old designs were worked into Zack's. Zack's final appearance includes a neater soldier uniform with no modifications made, a contrast to Cloud's tricked-out setup. This results in a more symmetrical design for his outfit, which contrasts with Cloud's asymmetry in a way that loosely echoes Sephiroth's visual design, though the difference is less pronounced. Zack's uniform is a bit darker than Cloud's in color, and so is his hair. Zack's hair is Cloud's original black, but coincidentally contrasts nicely against his final blonde hair color. All of this is excellent subtlety. In the game's story, Zack is a stand-in to show the kind of man that Cloud wishes he could be. It only makes sense then that he should resemble the legendary samurai we'll talk about soon. And his use of Cloud's original design, though a last-minute choice, helps augment his place in Cloud's life. Zack, too, has Mako eyes, as all soldiers do. Nomura has described that he wanted Sephiroth, the game's antagonist, to be kakoi. This is best translated from Japanese to cool, good-looking, or stylish. Sephiroth's name could be derived from a set of Jewish texts, known as the Kabbalah. His namesake, the Sphirot, are 10 energies and vessels that God uses to reveal himself in our world. They ultimately serve as a guide to help you consider your actions before taking them. This could apply to his final form as Sefer Sephiroth, which could refer to the Sefer Sphirot, translated from Hebrew as Book of Numbers. This is the 4th book of the Torah, the specific text where the Sephiroth are discussed. Almost everything in Sephiroth's design is a counter to Cloud's. Sephiroth wears the ornate leather belt featured in soldier uniforms on his bare chest. His outfit is sleek and symmetrical, contrasting Cloud's asymmetry. There's an air of neo-futurism in his design that comes with the slickness of his outfit and simplicity of his color palette. The characters of Final Fantasy VII all feature armor or bangles, but using Cloud as an example, where his armor is bulky and weathered, Sephiroth's looks manufactured and polished. As for his color palette, aside from his eyes and skin, the only colors present on Sephiroth are black and white, perhaps a subtle gesture to his worldview. Of course, his long, silver hair contrasts Cloud's spiky blonde hair. In character art, we can once again see contrast between characters. Cloud's official art depicts him holding his weapon over his shoulder with his right hand, while Sephiroth holds his at his waist with his left. Sephiroth has two distinct bangs that hang down over his face, a design choice made by Nomura at an earlier point in development that we'll discuss later. Sephiroth has Mako eyes, but because of how he was conceived, they are more pure than other soldiers. This is illustrated in-game by making his eyes turquoise rather than blue. His pupils are shaped like the eyes of a cat, another nod to his heritage. As he is the game's final boss, Sephiroth takes on many forms, each featuring the same classic design philosophies employed in Nomura's monster designing work thus far. These include Bizarro Sephiroth and Safer Sephiroth. Both of these designs use Sephiroth's true body, which is severed at the waistline. Since the party battles 4 parts of Jenova's body throughout the campaign of Final Fantasy VII, Bizarro Sephiroth's design acts as an intermediary between Jenova's presence as an antagonist and Sephiroth's final form. We can also see that the relation between both humanoid subjects here resembles the top third of the Statue of the Gods from Final Fantasy VI. Though it may be a reference to the Safer Sephiroth, Safer Sephiroth's name could also mean to say Seraph Sephiroth. Seraphim, translated from Hebrew as the Burning Ones, are eldritch beings in Judaism and Christianity. It is said that if a mortal gazes upon one, they will incinerate at that moment. Safer Sephiroth's design references seraphim, likely as they were depicted in cathedral murals during the Renaissance era. Seraphim are depicted with 6 wings, and Safer Sephiroth has 6 wings in place of his missing legs. Considering his work on God Kefka in Final Fantasy VI, it isn't too difficult to believe Nomura would utilize religious imagery in order to illustrate the godhood of a main antagonist. In his final form, Sephiroth also shares God Kefka's Heartless Angel attack, which brings the entire party down to 1 HP. Nomura modeled Cloud and Sephiroth's relationship after the rivalry between legendary Japanese samurai Miyamoto Musashi and Sasuke Kojiro. Kojiro was a swordsman who wielded Mono Hoshizou, a 90cm or 2 foot and 9 inch straight-edged nodachi. He is noted as one of Japan's most famous and kakoi samurai. Miyamoto Musashi was a famous ronin who defeated Kojiro with a large bakken blade carved out of a wooden oar. The weapon he used in this battle was 110 centimeters, or 3 feet and 6 inches. Musashi killed Kojiro in one hit with his bakken by counterattacking his enemy's first strike, breaking Kojiro's ribcage, puncturing his lung and killing him. In some interpretations of the story, Musashi leaps above Kojiro's head and cracks his skull with the bakken. The two had their duel in the early Edo period of Japan, and it's memorialized on Ganryujima Island, Japan, where the duel took place. This allusion to Japanese history also informs the design choices of Final Fantasy VII's most iconic weapons. Cloud's Buster Sword, dubbed the Giant Kitchen Knife during development, was based on the large ore blade Musashi wielded against Kojiro. In fact, early sketches of Cloud show that his weapon's dimensions were initially much closer to Musashi's ore blade. Sephiroth's Masamune is a thin, piercing odachi measuring 10 feet. Early sketches depict his weapon in more realistic proportions as well. In the end, both final weapons greatly exaggerate their source material. A character relationship chart drawn by Nomura from the earliest days of production shows us that the story would only have 3 main characters at first, including Cloud, Tifa, and Blow, who would later be renamed to Barret. In this iteration, the Turks are pursuing Tifa, and she and Sephiroth are siblings. Just a bit later in production, the decision would be made to create a new heroine named Aerith from parts of Tifa's character. Aerith went through several iterations, especially concerning what her relationship to Sephiroth was. In the first draft, they were siblings. In another, they were lovers. By the final draft, Zack had been created and had the role of Aerith's late boyfriend. The similarities in Sephiroth and Aerith's appearances remained in their final designs despite the changes, and help subtly communicate their narrative roles, as we'll discuss later. Aerith's sacrifice was decided because of the impact it would have. In every Final Fantasy thus far, a heroic character akin to Barret would sacrifice themselves for the rest of the party. The writers of Final Fantasy VII wanted to change this tradition and find a way to make it a speaking point on life, the game's core theme.
When we were creating Final Fantasy III, my mother passed away. And ever since, I have been thinking about the theme life. Life exists in many things. And I was curious about what would happen if I attempted to analyze life in a mathematical and logical way. Maybe this was my approach in overcoming the grief I was experiencing. This is the first time in the series that this particular theme actually appears in the game itself.
This would become one of the most iconic moments in video game history because of its emotional impact. The idea of a classic Final Fantasy sacrifice being depicted as murder of an innocent heroine motivated Nomura, Kitase, and Nojima to create a second mainstay heroine who would not pass on. Because of this, Aerith was separated from Tifa, inheriting some facets such as being pursued by the Turks, and some original ideas were left behind with Tifa's name's etymology. Tifa's name could be derived from Tiferet, the sixth Sphira discussed in the Book of Numbers. Tiferet means beauty, or glory, and is the center of the Tree of Life, balancing out opposite energies against each other. Tifa's name, drawing from the same source material as Sephiroth's, suggests an early conceptual link, and hints at a duality between Aerith and Sephiroth before Aerith was fully distinguished as her own character. Her final name is derived from the word Earth, as it is pronounced in Japanese. This Japanese pronunciation tripped up the Final Fantasy VII localization team, leading to a never-ending debate among American fans over Aerith's true name. Her new look included a long dress, contrasting with Tifa's miniskirt. She wears a pink ribbon in her hair. This is the focal point of her design. In it, she hides her white materia, which can cast the spell Holy to counteract Meteor and protect the planet. This materia can only be seen on her battle model, her field model during the wall market sequence, and in her death scene. The fringes of Aerith's hair are very similar to Sephiroth's, due to the original plan for them to be siblings. Things changed, but the fringes stayed. They admittedly slipped past Nomura, but it's a welcome accident, as their matching haircuts help display the dynamic between these two. You see, Aerith is the last surviving member of the Cetra, an ancient people able to communicate directly with the planet, while Sephiroth was created by Shinra through experiments attempting to replicate Cetra abilities by implanting cells from the extraterrestrial being Genova into a human fetus. Aerith and Sephiroth's lineage is also depicted in their eye color. Aerith's eyes are green. Her and her late mother, Ifalna, are the only two characters in Final Fantasy VII with green eyes. This symbolizes their connection to the planet. Mako eyes are characterized by their vague green hue, a great visual indication toward the true purpose of Sephiroth and the Soldier program. Like Zack and Sephiroth, Aerith's design is symmetrical. Considering her fringes, eye color, and interactions with Cloud, we can infer that the symmetry in her design is yet again a conscious choice made to contrast with Cloud from a different angle. With Zack, Sephiroth, and Aerith, we have Cloud's design being challenged by a friend who pushes, encourages, and takes care of him, a rival to whom he has a personal vendetta, and a woman who can counter his brooding and break through to his emotional core. Thankfully, even though Aerith was extracted from her, Tifa's name still makes perfect sense in her final characterization. Tiferet in Judaism symbolizes the heart, compassion, and the attribute of truth. It also represents the harmony of opposite energies, such as mercy and justice. Considering her relationship with Cloud, Tifa's name makes perfect sense. She is the most emotionally mature and empathetic character in the party, but isn't afraid to kick some ass when needed. While Cloud fights with a sword as tall as he is, and Barrett shoots from a gun prosthetic, Tifa kicks, punches, and slaps her way through their adventure with sheer strength. All the while, she is Cloud's tether to his past, and helps him sort out his fragmented identity when he is incapacitated. Tifa's outfit is asymmetrical, similar to Cloud's, including additional armoring on her left elbow and foot. Her outfit contrasts with Aerith's, as it is form-fitting and shows off more of her skin. Her hair is fashioned like a dolphin tail at its ends, as she is thematically connected to the animal. Dolphins are a symbol of peace and harmony. Tifa's breasts are the focal point of her design. The developers had nicknames for each character during the game's production. These nicknames were left unused in the game's code, and Tifa's nickname was Miss Busty. While designing her, Nomura wrote out the measurements for her bust, waist, and hips. These measurements make her bra size about a 32 D in American bra sizes. Because of this, she would go on to become a sex symbol in pop culture to this day. The issue I'm discussing here is not her breasts specifically, but the intent behind them. Her development nickname is pretty revealing as to how Tifa was seen by the game's staff, and that is the problematic part. For reference, Aerith and Yuffie's nicknames made no comment on their physical appearance. Thankfully, she wasn't downplayed in the writing room, and, as mentioned before, Tifa's personality is a strong point of her character. Despite being one of the first characters designed for Final Fantasy VII, Barrett Wallace's development wasn't explicitly touched upon by the team in interviews. By piecing together some early character profiles available in the Final Fantasy VII Ultimania, I've only been able to find a few things. Firstly, his name might derive from the Japanese pronunciation of the word bullet. Secondly, he was going to hold a gun in his open hand as well, but this was removed to keep the attention on the gun arm, which became his signature character piece, similar to Cloud's Buster Sword. Thirdly, and lastly, is that his origin story is generally the same as it was in earlier drafts of the game, albeit the first few concepts saw Marlene as Barrett's biological daughter and Dyne named Duel, among other small differences. His final appearance depicts him as a tall, buff man with a gun grafted on his right arm instead of a prosthetic. Of course, this gun arm is the focal point of his design. He wears a rugged combat getup that echoes B.A. Baracus, a character played by Mr. T in the A-Team. The English localization of Final Fantasy VII also played into this, providing Barrett with a more bombastic characterization than before, including calling Cloud Foo.
I'm Peter Foo!
As he is the first playable black character in a Final Fantasy game, and one of the only black characters in the game, much discourse has endured discussing whether or not his portrayal is a racist one. Nomura and the others would consider this going forward. Though Barrett's design and personality have generated some controversy, he is a well-developed character with a distinct and compelling backstory, and his portrayal becomes more nuanced when considered within full narrative context instead of focusing on surface-level traits alone. Alongside Barrett, Cait Sith was one of the earliest character concepts Nomura had long wanted to create. What he neglected to mention was that he already had. Cait Sith first appeared as an Esper named Stray in Final Fantasy VI, with an appearance nearly identical to his final design for 7. The only new additions are his crown and Moogle robot. Cait Sith originates from Scottish folklore. Katshi are black cats the size of a dog with a white spot on their chests, and walk with their hind legs. They are fairies that bring misfortunes to people. The concept of the black cat depicted in Halloween paraphernalia originates from the Katshi. The most popular legend related to the fairies goes like this. A man is out alone and sees 9 black cats carrying a coffin with a crown on it. They tell him to tell Tom Tildrum that Tim Toldrum is dead. Dazed, the man returns home and confides in his wife what had just taken place. As he does, the couple's own black cat perks its ears, rises, and says in a human voice, "Then that means I am the king of cats." It runs up the chimney and it is never seen again. Artifacts of this legend can be seen all over Cait Sith's design. Though it would appear in later installments, Cait Sith did not have a Scottish voice in the original Final Fantasy VII. Nomura's always had some out-of-the-box ideas. Like Cait Sith, Red 13 is one of those. It is highly likely that he was inspired by Nomura's favorite animal, the lion. His weapon is his headdress, which was inspired by Native American culture. Nomura decided to call him Red 13 because a name that didn't sound like a name could sound interesting. His true name, Nanaki, was coined by event planner Jun Akiyama. With Red's design, we can see Nomura's fascination with tattoos shine through. Barrett has a tattoo, but it's just one on his left shoulder. Nanaki's body is covered in ink. On one hand, it could be Tetsuya Nomura experimenting with things that look cool, but considering Red's headdress, it might also be inspired by tattooing practices in some Native American cultures. Red 13's species is still unnamed in the lore of Final Fantasy VII, but his kind are known to live for hundreds of years. The only other kind of his species shown in the game are his late father Seto and his 2 children from 500 years in the future. The behind-the-scenes design process of Sid Highwind reflects Nomura's ambition to create his own characters capable of overtaking the popularity of the Final Fantasy IV party. Sid Highwind derives both his surname and Dragoon association from Cain Highwind of Final Fantasy IV, who in turn inherited them from Ricard Highwind of Final Fantasy II. As the third instance, Sid helps establish Highwind as a recurring Dragoon surname within the series. He is also technically the second playable Sid in the series, after Final Fantasy IV's Sid Polendina. Nomura's goal all throughout was to do something different with Sid in this Final Fantasy. The Sids of Final Fantasy past often functioned as reliable guide characters who assisted with party progression and transportation. Sid Highwind still fulfills this traditional role within Final Fantasy VII, but in a more flawed and constrained way. He brings with him the Tiny Bronco, which continues the series' airship progression, but it is badly damaged and can only travel across the sea rather than fly freely, limiting its usefulness compared to earlier entries. This sense of limitation mirrors aspects of his characterization as well, as Sid is portrayed as a verbally abusive potty mouth, often taking his anger out on his assistant Shara, and habitually smoking after battles, which leaves us with a rough-edged and emotionally unpolished version of the traditionally dependable Sid archetype. Early drafts of Yuffie Kisaragi portrayed her as a foul-mouthed 25-year-old ninja and ex-soldier mercenary dressed in red, who followed the party across the world in pursuit of a large bounty on Cloud. In this version, Yuffie had wanted posters displayed worldwide depicting her at various ages and appearances. The most recent poster the player saw determined her stats the next time the party encountered her. Yuffie's final appearance depicts her at 16 years old. Her characterization is quite different from her original concept, instead placing her as the daughter of her homeland, Wutai's leader, and her backstory centers on the decline of Wutai after its war with Shinra, which left her homeland politically weakened and culturally diminished. This weakened state leads Yuffie to develop an insatiable desire for materia, which she justifies by believing it could be used to strengthen Wutai and make her homeland capable of defeating Shinra once and for all. Like Aerith and Tifa, Vincent Valentine's design was adapted from an early draft of Sephiroth. Tifa's appearance was originally Aerith's, and Aerith and Sephiroth were once planned to be siblings. This makes Vincent's hair and eye color intriguing, as they are the same as Tifa's. Black hair with red eyes. He was named by Yoshinori Kitase, and his design is aesthetically centered around horror. In his first backstory draft, Vincent was portrayed as a detective sent by a corporate rival of the Shinra Corporation to investigate and expose the unethical practices of Dr. Hojo. This version of the story included Hojo drugging and forcibly experimenting on Lucrezia Crescent, with Vincent attempting to save her out of ethical duty instead of the deeply personal and emotional motivation depicted in the final game. The detective role seems to be an homage to the original Detective Joe concept for the game. He'd be the only character able to trigger his limit break on the field, allowing him to transform into different horror-themed monsters in non-combat settings, and determining different trajectories for cutscenes based on his appearance. The focal point of his design are his red cloak and head wraps. He is the only member of the Final Fantasy VII party to not have iron plating in his design. His surname, Valentine, might be as on the nose as they get, as in his final backstory, he is an elite agent for Shinra, known as a Turk, who served as a bodyguard for Dr. Hojo and Lucrezia Crescent while they worked on the Genova project, which ultimately leads to the creation of Sephiroth. Vincent and Lucrezia fall in love during this period, but it was not to be. Lucrezia had already volunteered to bear Hojo's child in the name of science, her consent framed within institutional pressure and Hojo's authority over the project, leaving her little room for refusal. Back when they were an ex-soldier and a detective, Yuffie and Vincent were nearly left on the cutting room floor. Their original concepts were far too hefty to include in the game before the deadline. Ultimately, they were kept and adapted by the team, as most ideas for the game were. Ju Nakayama was a large part in saving them from being removed and adapting their new stories. He was especially fond of Yuffie. Takashi Tokita would contribute to portions of Yuffie's final episode, and Hiroki Chiba was in charge of managing Vincent's. It is because of their near exclusion that Yuffie and Vincent's final stories are brief, optional, and don't hold much weight in the overarching narrative of Final Fantasy VII. The two also do not appear in any full-motion video cutscenes due to their optional nature. Rufus Shinra and his Turks are the first organized group villain Nomura designed. Rufus's name is Latin for red-haired. His last name, Shinra, is derived from the Japanese word Shinra, which means myth or legend. Despite his name meaning red-haired, he actually has blonde hair. The only time he has red hair is in his chibi character model. He fights alongside a dog, similar to Shadow from Final Fantasy VI. Shinra's board of executives, the Turks, and the men in black robes should also be noted here, despite their simple designs. I can't find much to cite regarding their designs, but knowing Nomura's style and what's to come, the minor antagonists of Final Fantasy VII are just as noteworthy as the main cast. These characters show that Nomura can make unique groups in their own organized uniform, unique outfits, or even with obscured faces. In sum, the characters of Final Fantasy VII are a healthy mix of Nomura's favorite design choices. This healthy mix helps the main cast feel like a solid unit. He certainly succeeded in making an iconic bunch of characters to be remembered and loved by fans. It's been said so many times, but Nomura's character work here is brilliant. The characters in this game will be echoed in Nomura's future work quite a lot. Final Fantasy VII is the most popular Final Fantasy to date, and one of the most important games of all time. The impact of this game cannot be overstated. This game was Squaresoft's first in-house 3D project on the brand new PlayStation, and contains a large number of firsts for the Final Fantasy series, the JRPG genre, and the gaming industry. For one last brief overview, Final Fantasy VII moved the Final Fantasy series to PlayStation and embraced the new format of CD-ROM. With its massive story spanning 3 of these CD discs, Final Fantasy VII featured fully playable 3D characters, introduced the limit break system to the ATB combat system, and contains one of the best JRPG narratives in terms of scope, emotion, pacing, and presentation. The list goes on for what makes Final Fantasy VII such a cornerstone in gaming.
Within 5 years at Squaresoft, Tetsuya Nomura advanced from debugger to character designer, story concept, and battle visual director on Square Enix's most successful video game. By the time Final Fantasy VII launched, his work had reached icon status. Through relentless effort and willingness to pitch every single idea, Nomura achieved remarkable career success. From sketches of lions to giant kitchen knives, his creative journey was only just beginning. It stands as an inspiring story of perseverance, creativity, and authenticity. My name is Joe. I have talked. Thank you for watching.